Hey, good morning and welcome to Crosstalk Podcast. We are multiplying like mushrooms around here, and we found a guy named Brandon, and he is gonna. Hey, Brandon. Brandon is gonna he's gonna podcast with us, and so we're looking forward to it. Welcome to this podcast. This one's recorded, though you're watching this, and it's the 23rd of November. And we're glad you're watching it, and we're going to probably watch it with you. We're recording this on the 16th of November?
Yes.
And we're having a good time. We're enjoying our time together, but we're pre-recording so that we don't miss the week of Thanksgiving. On the week of Thanksgiving, we'll be getting ready for turkey and for dressing and all the things that are going on with family. And so, but, you know, you're probably going to be bored sitting here on a Tuesday morning with your cup of coffee, and we would love to be a part of your Tuesday morning. So thank you for being with us, and we're glad you're here. As I said, Brandon's here, Joe DeLoach is here as always, and Brian Beveridge is here doing double duty over there as our AV tech / podcaster. So we're here, and we're going to talk about a topic. We had this idea. And I purchased on Amazon.com a book of cards. I don't know how many cards there are here, probably 60 cards. And the cards are Christian culture, the game of Christian conversation. So we have lots of conversations, but we thought it might be interesting to get a little spicy and do some Christian culture questions. We certainly don't have to do these every week, but we're going to do these for the next couple weeks. And we're going to talk about this topic. And so and we want you to chime in, comment, give us some information, do all the things you do to tell us what you're thinking. I'll be paying attention to when we actually live cast. I'll be on as well. So when this is happening,
I'll be here too.
Yeah, Brian and I'll be here. We're going to comment with you. So feel free to comment. The question that I'm going to ask the guys here today is list 2 things that have been distracting you lately from listening to God. List the top 2 things. There might be 10 things, but list the top 2 things in your life that have been distracting you lately from listening to God. I will give you one, and I'll think about the second. For me, the one thing that's been distracting me lately from listening to God has been politics. Politics in the last 3 years has been like one of the greatest distractions from remembering what's important and what's most important. Donald Trump was the president, and he was tweeting like he had nothing else to do. Apparently he took his phone to the bathroom, took his phone to brush his teeth, took his phone to the dinner table, took his phone to bed, woke up in the middle of the night, and he would tweet nonstop. And I was on Twitter. I actually am back on Twitter, but I got so fed up with it by election night that I unsubscribed and shut down my Twitter account, because I was so by the end of the election cycle, I was so distracted from like what was important that I had lost myself. It was like I had been psyoped. I had been psychologically there was an operation against me, and I had actually I had forgotten who I was. I mean, seriously, I had become so sort of engaged in the politics of the election. And then once Joe Biden was elected around January 6th, when not everyone, but a lot of people went to protest, a lot of patriots went to protest at D.C., and there was this sort of crazy thing that happened on the steps of the Capitol. For me, all of these things have been so distracting. What about y'all?
I'd agree. Politics is definitely very distracting. I had to sign off of my YouTube and stuff like that because I stopped watching the news a long time ago. But I had to sign off my YouTube just because everything that was going on was so polarizing. It was either you agree with this or you disagree with this. There was no gray area to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Politics are definitely something that separates a lot of this country anymore, and it's definitely a lot of ideology that just does not agree. You're either on this side or this side. We can't agree to disagree anymore. It's definitely a huge issue in this country now.
That's because everybody's offended by everybody else's offendedness.
Yeah. I'm offended that you're offended.
Sometimes I figure I should probably pay attention to Fox News and CNN just so that I'm ready for any questions that may come to me on Sunday mornings. And I think and what I mean by that is I think the people of our community can get distracted by media. And sometimes it's like we come ready for bear to church just to sort of spout off what we've, and whether it's men's groups or Sunday school classes, just to spout off what we've sort of soaked in, I guess, during the week. It's like the media has really prevailed over us more than I think people are starting to realize it now. But
Well, see, I got to tell you, I quit watching the news for a whole different reason. I quit watching the news because it looks like Joe Biden looks like one of Jeff Dunham's puppets. He looks like Walter. So it
Yes,
kinda,
he does.
And Nancy Pelosi looks like Peanut,
oh my goodness, who's Peanut?
another one of his characters.
How did
All
this
right,
happen?
I had no idea because he made those in the 80s.
They're going to censor us for saying stuff.
That's
like that.
right.
Hey,
The fact checkers are going to get us. PolitiFact is going to have. He does not look like. Peanut.
no, they've actually put the pictures side by side. They look exactly alike.
So you just couldn't watch it because literally he's a puppet on
Right.
stage.
And I'm laughing at him because I'm like, he's a puppet on a string, which is literally what he is anyways. And I know we usually don't get into politics, but
Well, I mean, we're not talking like who's better than who, but I mean, it all feels like a show. It feels
right.
like you turn the television on and it's like, what else is there to talk about? There's got to be other things to talk about.
And see, you're talking about the politics, and I know this is going to sound kind of out there, but the stuff going on under like the whole denomination has been one of the big things distracting me because if you read the Bible, it clearly states exactly how most of us feel, and then you got some that want to change the Bible to make it suit them.
Sure,
And I know I'm digging into a deep hole
that's okay.
but
We'll pull you out.
it needs to be dug. But I mean, there's
It's okay.
it's a constant battle that shouldn't be being fought because it states in the Bible, man should not lay with man.
Well, and it's more than that too. Like there's so many deep. If you really want to run down that rabbit trail, like in our denomination, the fact that there's about to be in the next 12 years, the majority of votes for our representative delegations are going to be held by African delegates. You can really argue that while all the money, not all the money, but I'd say the lion's share of the financial underpinning of our denomination comes from America, we are, because our denomination, the numbers of our denomination are shrinking, we're losing representation, right, from America, or United States of America churches to the African churches. So whether you're progressive or conservative or traditionalist, you know, everybody feels the tension of holding all the coinage, and the votes for where that money goes are about to be in the hands of somebody across the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
And it just so happens that they're blacks, right? So then there's this little underpinning of racism, right? And I think both sides are I don't know whether race was in the middle of it or not. I don't know how anybody would feel about having all the money. I guess you have to ask billionaires all the money and be taxed to the point where your givings are supporting all the little poor people, right? The little useless eaters down there somewhere out in the valley. But that's really what's happened. I mean, we have held the American churches have, through their apportionments and giving, have been and rightly so generous, but they're so much more wealthy financially than say the churches in the conferences in Africa or in the Philippines, and as a result now the churches in Africa and the Philippines are growing, and they're going to have more votes in about 12 years, more votes than us.
But if we look at the trend, the poor churches are doing better than the rich churches. So what are we doing wrong compared to what they're doing?
Well, I think you make good points. What is it that grows a church? Is it any wonder that like churches that are poor or disenfranchised or disconnected are the places where God is able to get growth? I mean, whether it's in America, small little churches that are feeling like they're being pressed upon, grow. I mean, we're seeing that in Putnam County. There are smaller churches that feel pressed upon, and like the urgency of that is creating growth in their churches. Anyway, so that's one of the things I think about. I think about politics. So somebody else list the top two things that have been distracting you from God.
Fear.
From listening.
Fear of not only politics, but the future. I mean, I look in the room, I'm the oldest one here. Fear of the future, health-wise, financial-wise. You become so engrossed in, worrying about what's going to happen that and don't listen to God. And yeah, I constantly have to stop and remind myself, well, He's taken care of me for 72 years. He's going to take care of me here on out. Insecurity, a lot of that. You ask about growth in churches. I think that's one reason the wealthy churches don't grow. Wealthy people tend to be more secure than poor people. So they don't feel like they need the church. They don't feel like, youth today don't feel like they need God.
Well, a lot of times that's because they feel like they're being pushed out and pushed to the side.
What I think, the reason the youth isn't, people younger than me, are not going into the churches is not because they don't believe in God, but because they're not finding God within the church.
God's not there.
Yeah.
Right.
We covered that, the reasons people, they don't see God, they don't talk about Him, you don't teach Him. But I'm not saying they don't believe in Him, they just don't feel like they need Him. For a lot of families today, it's far more important that their youth, and I'm speaking teenage, middle school up, is much more important for them to play any sport than it is to go to church. And I ask parents about that, and that way they stay busy all during the week. They're out of trouble. Where have we lost the Wednesday night was church, Sunday was church? Now,
I never grew up that way.
well, say in the South, that was it. Wednesday night was
it was
Wednesday
culture.
night service.
It was
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
I'm from Jersey, and there's a lot of people, like you come down here, and I thought it was amazing, like within a mile radius, you could find like 7, 8 churches.
Mm-hmm.
You go up to New Jersey, and like a mile radius, you're lucky if in a 10-mile radius, you're lucky if you find a church. And generally it's high church, it's Catholic churches.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of Methodist or anything like that, but it's hard to find a church up north. Meanwhile, you come down here, there's a church on every other corner.
That's true.
So
Yeah, I don't know what we're much culturally. If you really just, from what my understanding is, that we are very much more independent in the South. This goes back to Civil War. Like we're
as a
much more
Northerner, I'd agree.
we're much more self-starting, and so Catholics are much more connected. Whereas Protestants are typically much more like me take care of this, and so I think within that combined with the fact that historically we were agrarian, so you had to be able to get on the wagon or the Model T and be able to drive to the church. So there were a lot of churches because we're all spread out.
That's right. A lot of country churches.
We're all over the place. There are 8 if you count Ararat. Mount Ararat UMC or Methodist Church, they're no longer UMC, but that
We passed that on the way here.
yeah, so they disaffiliated, but from our United Methodist Church. But there are 8, if you count him or them, there are 8 United Methodist churches. I think is that right? 7 or 8.
There's 8,
In Putnam
and then you
County.
got the independent.
Yeah, and then you've got, and they left probably in '68, which used to be the Mill Imperial United Methodist
Well,
Church.
if you look just over here on this strip that we're on, which is Midas and Jefferson, you got the First Baptist, you got the Presbyterian, you got the Methodist, you got the AME Church over across the street. You
St.
got
John's on the hill.
you got Church of Christ within a 2-mile radius,
That's 5. Right
and then you got Marshall Memorial. Then you got the Independent Methodist Church. Then you got Mount
Church
Ararat.
of God, Episcopal Church.
Oh yeah, and you got the Episcopal
Presbyterian.
Church. So I mean,
I can't explain why everybody has a church, but it's sort of the norm for us. But there are lots of churches. The question is, the question I ask is, what is it that has pushed us away or pulled us away from our faith?
I think it's
Our
convenience.
community.
Like back in Jersey, I grew up in Defford, and Defford started out as it was just a bunch of pig farms. It was a small town, but then Walmarts and Wawas, which are little convenience stores.
Yeah.
And
Wawa.
exactly. Convenience pushed out the churches.
Yeah.
The stores and the shops, and not even the mom and pop shops, because the mom and pop shops, they're even getting pushed out by places like Walmart, Sam's Club, BJ's, and like bulk food stores. But I think convenience of having things closer, which I mean, it's kind of a thing of moving into a city. It's why you're moving there. But that stuff is what pushes the churches out. And people forget that they need to go to church to praise God and to communicate with like-minded people. That they're just, instead of going to church, they're just going to Walmart because they need to run and it's right up the street. In Deptford, there were more Wawas than churches. Like in a mile radius, you would be finding 7, 8 Wawas, and you'd be hard pressed to find a church.
What is a Wawa?
It's a gas
Convenience
station.
store.
It's a gas station, but it's a little.
Get a candy
convenience.
bar.
It's like a quick stop.
It's where you get your Twinkie.
It's like our jet food stores.
Or your
now.
Gotcha.
you get your
Yeah.
six.
I understand.
I listened to a podcast called Bards FM, BARDS FM, and if you find your cell phone and go find that podcast, it's good. But the guy was talking yesterday. The guy he's a Christian, and I don't know if he's a pastor or not, but he speaks as though he's a pastor, and he speaks a lot about Scripture. He said that we have lost, we've forgotten and lost the understanding of original sourcing, and. But you make a comment like we used to be pig farm or a group, there was a conglomerate of pig farms in Deptford. Here we used to be cotton fields, and then at some point it became dairies. But we've lost
Bone
that
label.
sense too. There's still a few dairies here and there in this community.
I think it's
Like
4 or
yeah,
6.
3 or it's not that many, but there's still a few. But it's almost impossible to compete in a world that's become Wawa. Like
Yeah.
a million Wawas or Dunkin' Donuts or
Yeah.
whatever you call it. And Eatonton's a little different, I think, because it is a little bit away from a little bit off the beaten path. Though 441 runs right through us. We are sort of that town between Milledgeville and Madison on 441. So on the way to Athens, on the way to Milledgeville.
It's kind of like a sub-rural area.
It is rural, but it's still connected.
It's
But
almost like a suburb.
It's like a sub-rural area.
But the
Yeah.
church, and many times we get forgotten. The thing I always remind people, they say, "Well, Eatonton's really far out." And I said, "Yeah, but we're on WSB's weather every morning. I turn on WSB for the weather, Channel 2 Action News, and they have Eatonton.
You know why? Lake Oconee.
I just figured it was like it looks good on the map.
That's the reason.
Canton was always on there too, so like
I think
I come from
Eaton is
Millen-
because of Lake Oconee.
But Eatonton is a rural. It feels rural, and sometimes we, for better or worse, identify ourselves as sort of rural. Though some of us probably don't like that term. But I guess what I'm saying is when we get back to original source, the church is that original source, and we've been so distracted by so many bigger things with media. So like, there's a football team just north of here that's number 1 in the nation. Everybody seems to focus in on football, and everyone seems to focus in on the things of sports in our community. I mean, there's a lot of sports going on in Putnam County,
Yep.
and I don't think we're alone. I think most communities have become so sports driven that we don't that churches, though we all love church or we all love our community, our church communities. We're exhausted by Sunday morning. So a lot of people our age, have kids going and playing football, baseball, softball, volleyball, ball, and they are exhausted. And so church gets sort of the leftovers if there's anything.
If there's anything left over.
And I think our community is really hurting.
Another thing I think it hurts us is, listening to God. I think noise. We're so bombarded with constant, the TV, the media, even music. How many times, how can you hear God, listen to God, when you're so busy listening to other stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Do we take time to shut everything off and sit there and just listen?
It's hard to disconnect. Like when you
That's
have
the
your,
word,
when you
that's-
have your phone and everything.
The bingo.
It's
There it is.
hard
It
to
comes back to the
disconnect.
phone.
For a long time, the first thing I did when I woke up was go for my phone. That was
I
the
wonder what we
first
would
thing
do
I
if
did.
God texted us.
I think we would freak out. We would think that it's somebody playing a joke on us.
I just wonder.
I think that we
But
would
isn't
think
that
that it was
prayer?
somebody playing a joke. on
In some
us.
ways, isn't that what prayer becomes?
It is.
A place for us to communicate.
And see, that's another thing. Prayer to me is so important. And again, dealing with youth, they think prayer is supposed to be hands folded, heads bowed, that. And I keep, no, you can pray walking. You pray like you're talking to me. They don't understand that
Pray
because
like you're talking to a friend.
that's right. And so that's just it.
I want to say something too that's going to probably step on some toes.
Well, we would
I
expect
think we've
nothing
already
less.
stepped on
Really?
a couple toes.
We would
But-
expect nothing less from you.
Another thing too is we also are so stuck in our liturgy and our traditions and our formalities, and it's so form-driven church. There's no alteration from, well, unless you forget to do the veterans thing like you did last week. But we always follow the same streamline.
8:45 service.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
We always follow that streamlined. This is how we do it. Service.
We've always done it this way.
We never change it up any and say, oh, we're going to put like offering first and then, this last. Or, we don't move anything around in the service. It's always opening prayer, like opening hymn, opening prayer. It's all a formality.
Right.
We get lost in that. We don't look at, okay, let's let God work and do.
I got a question. How many of us at this table are going to have turkey for Thanksgiving? You're not doing the turkey thing.
No, we talked about that yesterday on why.
I have begged anyone who will listen to me to consider steak.
I'll eat steak.
I don't dislike turkey. I'll have a slice of turkey, and I'm sure it's going to be good. But I love steak. But we don't ever do steak for Thanksgiving. You know how it's like? It takes like, if you're going to do a steak right, you just marinate it all day. 10 minutes, flip it, or 5 minutes, flip it.
See, it's tradition.
But we always, and
Tradition.
I'm telling you, my father-in-law would probably lose his noodle if we decided to not
What do
go.
you think? 200 years ago, you didn't eat steak like we eat them. There weren't grills 250 years
Really?
ago. They used turkeys.
They didn't
You
have a-
think
they didn't have-
preserving, you could kill the turkey, brine it, and eat it, and you'd have to eat it up in 24 hours.
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't hard to eat it up.
No,
I'm sure
I mean, when you did-
20
that
people
was-
showed up.
Why does the South love chicken so much? That was the only fresh meat you had
It's the
year
thing in the
round.
yard.
Backyard.
Yeah, but there it was.
That was your pest control.
That was same thing for turkey, even though that is stupidest and the hardest
really
things
are.
in the world to raise. They
I'm
are.
sure.
They are.
But we get stuck in turkey on Thanksgiving, and we all know that steak is, well, I shouldn't say we all know, but I'm pretty sure we all know steak is better than.
I'll go ahead and tell you.
Then turkey.
I'm not. I like turkey, but I'm not like big on it like all the time.
Oh, I like it because there's a lot of
The
leftovers.
only time,
Yeah.
the only time myself and family ever sat down and ate turkey was Thanksgiving. And this is going to be the first year that we actually don't have turkey on Thanksgiving.
And see, that's the only reason I really get together and go for Thanksgiving dinner is to be with family.
Yeah.
I don't care about the whole meat. I'm one of these ones. I don't get into the whole formality about having a turkey and this. I don't care what
You
we
know what,
eat
though?
as long as we're all together.
I bet your family. I bet there would be some real noses turned up if there was no turkey on.
Oh, they already, man, they made the menu out 2 weeks ago.
This morning when I was working out, the TV's on, and of course, it's advertisements. Publix, and I'm not necessarily saying this is my favorite grocery store, but they do the neatest advertisements. They did on Thanksgiving.
Sure.
They said Thanksgiving is about who's gathered around the table, not what's on the table.
That's true.
And I think that's very true. I guess we've always had turkey. We usually had.
Well, and we argue in my house because I shouldn't say my house, but the house I grew up in, because sweet potato souffle is not souffle without raisins in it. But my younger sister, being the spoiled little girl that she was, got her little own souffle without raisins, and I just thought that was ridiculous. But I am a stickler for worship wise. I'm a stickler for some boundaries, and I think about. On the other hand, I'm completely okay with relaxing some of those expectations. But as I think of myself as like a football referee, as a pastor, I think that's the best way for pastors to see themselves. If we
That's
are
a good analogy.
if we are engaging sort of the process, there have to be rules. There don't have, and I don't want to get stuck in rules. But on the other hand, like if you watch a football game and you saw the referee sort of let the ball land wherever it lands and set no, that's not. It's not fourth down. It's third down. Like there are a lot. That wasn't. He didn't have a foot inbounds when he caught that ball. Like there would be chaos.
Well, you look at the rules, 10 Commandments.
Yes.
When society was first starting, what did God do?
Yeah.
He gave Moses 10 things for people to live by.
And so the community can't come together unless there's some ground rules.
Without
So I
rules is
wouldn't-
chaos.
I wasn't
becomes
talking
chaos.
specifically about pastors.
No, I'm not.
I was
don't
talking
feel
about,
offended.
we have congregation members, when we tried to take out the Apostles' Creed in the 11 o'clock service, they came to us and were pitching a fit because we
understand.
took it out.
I
Because
understand.
we had so much other stuff we were trying to add to
Do you
make
know,
it.
though, taking that out, people forget who we are.
That's right. And see, that's why I would fight to keep it in.
And so I know it's a little rote. It's a little bit like, okay, I believe in God the Father Almighty. But like it's like the Pledge of Allegiance. So some people get really irritated. Okay, attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag. There's something important about the rhythm of of pledging to the flag and remembering all of those men and women who came before us in our nation and gave their lives for that flag. But most people don't think like that. Most people don't, but they get irritated with, okay, I got to pledge allegiance every day at school, But everybody in this nation probably understands that what that pledge is.
Sunday, your sermon about being watchful, being prepared. To me, why aren't we that way? Because we're not listening to God. I mean, you use Scripture to back up your sermon. Mm-hmm. God is telling us that. I mean, this was 2,000 plus years ago, when their world was changing.
Yeah.
So we need to be doing the same thing. But no, we're so busy listening to and that we
Yeah.
don't hear God.
Yeah.
We're so busy. Our inside our head is so filled with other crap. Excuse me.
That's okay.
Stuff that
Remember,
we don't
Christ
hear.
redeems all people. Christ redeems all people.
Yes, that's right.
Acronym.
But
Today's acronym is
Well,
CRAP.
I think that is what keeps us from listening to God. Fear and being so busy. I mean, we're so busy doing this, doing that, going da 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 da. At our house, we used to call it the train. Gotta. Like a and now that we're retired, all of a sudden, the train hasn't left the station yet. It's like, what do we do? I mean, it's really.
People don't know how to slow down anymore. It's because of these.
Well, see, that's-
you have anything that you want, no matter what it is.
Oh, it's right there.
It is a
Yeah.
couple
I could
thumb
probably-
moves away. That's all it is.
It's
If
how
you're bored,
irritate-
there's games.
I
There's
irritate
apps.
my family so bad because I don't have mine glued to me at all times. But my front porch is my sanctuary.
I think people are they're trying to connect with other people, because that's the main thing that people use this for, is to talk to other people. Even if it's just reading articles or forums, whatever, they are trying to connect, but they've become so disconnected from actually how to connect to people. And
They forget how.
They forget how. They forget how to go to church. They forget how to worship. They forget how to thank God for everything they have.
Kind of what Brian is saying. I think growing up, you went to church on Sunday. Now, we didn't do Wednesday night. We were farmers. We lived in the country. We didn't often go to church on Wednesday night. But Sunday, you either went to Sunday school. Our church only had preaching one Sunday a month. The other 3 Sundays, we had Sunday school. But you went on Sunday. It kind of started the week off right. It still does. Now, that's habit, I know. But I don't see that in today's world.
Well, see, we're creatures of habit. We're creatures of habit.
That's right.
And once you get started in a habit, it's hard to break it. But at the same time, sometimes we have to change habits to make room for better things to come in our life.
It's called being flexible. If you're not flexible, you become a dinosaur.
Well, there was this. I was at an Emmaus function. We had a Emmaus Walk to Emmaus is a group that has a retreat, and they're a gathering of several churches throughout the community. And in this region, they call themselves the Oconee River Basin Walk to Emmaus group, and they're from Madison to Buckhead, Greensboro, down to Milledgeville, and then us. And so that group gathered at our sanctuary on Friday, and I went out for a dessert. They had like a little dessert table. It's a great potluck. You bring your butter beans, and we supply somebody supplies the fried chicken, and the church usually does, and we did. Joe and I actually went and got it. It was good. This week it was really good. Nice moist chicken. I couldn't believe it was only like $50 at Ingles. So I'll give a plug to Ingles. So I went to get dessert, and there was a kid wearing an Oculus. Now, If you don't know what that is, it's
It's
like
a virtual reality glasses.
it's like you put your cell phone into a thing and you stick
Yeah,
it on your
yeah,
head.
thing.
And he had these two things, these little circular things in his hands, and he was like doing this weird like virtual reality thing, and he looked ridiculous.
I thought he was kung fu fighting in the like
You
gathering.
saw him too. Like he looks ridiculous, but that is something that's being placed into the hands of, I guess, the millennials. I find it to be completely obnoxious, but there are other people who play with these silly Oculus.
Well, if you
things.
think about it, younger people usually respond better to visual aids and hands-on interaction.
It's just one more distraction.
And see, that's one thing with our church services too. We're not very interactive. You come in,
It's not entertaining.
well, not only it's not really the entertaining part, but when you're sitting there, and no offense to any music minister, but when you're sitting there and you play a slow song right before the preacher speaks, you're going to more than likely fall asleep during the sermon.
So I get on YouTube and I watch Bethel Church, and I have always been a big fan of Bethel music. If you go to your iTunes and type in Bethel music, there's just great songs, and you've probably heard some of them. And we were watching the Sunday night service. It was it's out in California, Redding, California, which is one of the most beautiful parts of the country. And they're in this little they're in their big box church doing their worship, and everybody's got their cool hoodies on and everybody's dressed casually, and the preacher, it was a lady from England, she starts speaking, and as she's speaking, Sarah says, there's a lot of things going on here, but like, there's so much going on, but there's no format. Like, she just gathers them, the music starts playing behind her, there's no sort of intro, sort of welcome, and she starts speaking in her English accent. There was an Australian who had spoken before her, so Sarah says, is she English or is she Australian? And I had to listen, but as soon as I tried to listen, she started speaking in tongues.
Uh-oh.
And she started going, which I don't have a problem with, but it was very distracting to me. I said, well, that's not English, Sarah, so I can't tell you. And then immediately they brought about 15 people up for baptism, and they asked them to testify. Well, about 2/3 of them had been baptized already and were speaking their testimonies into the baptism. And Sarah and I were aghast because their reasons for baptism were not biblical or clear reasons for being baptized. There were a couple of guys who said, "I've given my life to Christ, and now I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to." And this.
What were the others saying?
Some of them were saying, "I've been baptized 10 years ago, but I've got to wash away all the brokenness that happened to me in the last 10 years.
Well, see,
or I need to rededicate my life, or I need to." Anyway, my point is, you talk about format. This format was off the rails. Okay, these folks were, not only was it hard to figure out what was going on, when they did figure out what was going on, it was, I hate to say it, but it wasn't right. And so, how does the church, and in the midst of that, this lady was speaking in tongues. It was distracting to a person who's been a Christian since I was 8, let alone somebody who walks in the door. So I don't know where is the line between off the rails,
Well, you
and
still keep it.
formatted, methodical church.
Well, you still keep it God based. That's the number one thing. You keep God in it, because if you take God out of it, you're here for the wrong
Hopefully
reason.
the Bible. Hopefully
Right.
you keep the Bible.
Well,
first.
God is the Bible.
Well, that's the rule book, right? That's
Right.
that's
right.
So
It's a playbook.
that's where you get your rules.
if you think about it, when you're driving your car, you took it. You had a book you read, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, the kids look at pictures on the computer,
Well, I took
so it's a
class.
different format, but it's still got the same information.
Homer Key was my driver's ed instructor. Yeah. Homer Key.
But it's got the same information, just a different format.
Right.
That's what we have to do, is change the format a little bit. Not anything drastic where we're dancing down the aisles.
Yeah, but you put
But-
steak on the table on Thanksgiving and people are going to go crazy.
Look,
To use the analogy.
look, I'd be the one to bring a potted meat and a pack of crackers and say, "Here's Thanksgiving
Yeah,
dinner."
sardines. Here's some sardines and some M rations.
Because we get into that whole thing, and that's not the
Sounds
reason.
like a really good idea.
But we get in that whole thing, and that's not the reason for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
The word Thanksgiving should tell you why you're there.
Giving.
Let's put some SOS on the table, right?
Oh.
Good Navy SOS. His mouth is watering, and I
Yes,
think
it
that's
is.
okay.
And I know that was a whole. That I can get into a whole sermon on that. but
Well,
Got a little off topic.
1/2 hour into it, we said list 2 topics or list 2 things that have been distracting to you lately from listening to God. I would have to say for me the other thing would be spicy food. No, I'm just kidding. But in all actuality,
ghost pepper, ghost pepper,
ghost pepper, beef jerky, the Atlanta Braves.
I think with that goes self-control.
Yeah, that definitely.
Appetite goes right along with it.
All appetites, whether it be sexual appetite, food
Right.
appetite. Yeah,
Today's world, self-control is the last thing anybody thinks about.
boy, we have a hot temper these days, don't we?
I want everything. I want it now.
Again, the phone.
And you know,
The phone, we can
what
just
is
get
it?
on there and do
Young
whatever.
People, not empowered. What's the word? Not endangered.
oppressed.
You know, it's due to me. It's what's due to me,
right.
and we don't. You don't have that. I mean, you think back on our country. I think about my parents, who grew up. My parents went from a mule and a horse and a buggy and a wagon to a spaceship in their lifetime.
That's
But
wild.
their life. My daddy worked hard. I mean, hard.
Sure.
And it was not always fun. It wasn't fun. His idea of fun was he got to go fishing.
Wow.
Do we have that in our country today? No.
Think about the generation before him that went from being in the deep South in the,
Oh, yeah.
just after the Civil War, trying to figure out Reconstruction, all the way to the Model T car.
Well, even
I mean,
try the war between the states when all of a sudden, whether your way of life was right or wrong, it went away.
Yeah.
Now you're regrouping. You've managed to hold things together, and now your main cash crop, cotton, is wiped out
That's right.
by
The
a
boll-
bug.
the boll weevil.
Boll weevil. And by the time you try to recoup that, the Great Depression hits.
Man.
Then he had we also had the 18 Spanish flu thing and all that junk that hit
Can you
through. And
imagine any of us at this table
1918.
having breakfast? You have a plate, not a plate, it's usually a tin plate, has one biscuit, maybe one piece of fat back, and that's it. And clear meat grease, if you ever had that, that's like nothing. That was breakfast.
I don't eat a whole lot of breakfast, so that actually does sound pretty good.
And then at 12 o'clock, the bell rang. If you were a farmer, you had an hour to go home, eat, and be back in the field. And there was no McDonald's, so you had to go home and either cook or find something. I mean,
We've gone over. We went over 5 minutes. So happy Thanksgiving to y'all. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and hopefully you'll have some fat back, clear grease, and some
and
biscuits.
a turkey.
Some biscuits, and hopefully you'll eat some turkey. But if you're like me, maybe you'll find a steak instead. God bless you, and we'll talk to you next week on Tuesday.